Hello there, and welcome to a Fringe Encounter round 2 with Jordan Hall. This one's going to be 5th Gen Warfare in 4D chess. Jordan, welcome back. Thank you for the time.
Yeah, it's nice to actually enter in here almost like I know you. I've met you. I've sat next to you in person, so it's not as same as the first time we met.
We did make contact at Midwestuary, one of the events that happens around this little corner. Speaking of which, I believe you're speaking at one called Southeastuary next month. If you want to say anything about that.
Well, I mean, this is true. In general, I don't prepare for anything, so I'm not at all prepared. I do know who the guest is going to be. Nobody else will know this person is, I don't think. And I think for me, the curiosity is about the difference. So I was at Midwestuary, and it had a certain sensibility to it. And I'm expecting this one to be both similar in certain ways and also very different in other ways. And noticing how that difference shows up, and for that matter, how that similarity shows up, is for me the primary interest.
Like to see what's coherent between different size events and whatnot.
And different people. Is this, Starbucks looks like Starbucks no matter where you go, which is part of its strength and also obviously part of its core weakness. Estuary is not going to look like Estuary in profound ways, but will also look like Estuary in other ways. And so that distinction is what I'm personally going to be looking forward to. In terms of just showing up, I don't even know. I've seen one video with Jordan Wood, I believe is his last name. Mm-hmm. So I have some tiny sense of who he is. The rest I don't think I've even ever heard of. So it'll all be new to me.
The crossovers are spicier if they're fresh.
That's right.
Speaking of which, I need to do a ritual since this is on my channel, and I thank you again for the view count. I do these savings throws versus mind control since people are swimming in it as part of the 5th generational warfare we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
And so to do that, I give them a choice on how they choose to resist the mind control, whether that's their will to survive, their social network, their accumulated wisdom, or the power of their heart. I roll the die, they make a choice, and if it's 10 or higher on the die, they take half damage from the manipulation tactics used in conversation and such. And you're you, and I'm me, so I think they really need the savings throws this time. So survival, social, wisdom, or heart?
Let's go with heart, actually.
Choose. Yeah. The survivalists in the crowd get prime 17 and will be taking half damage. Socialists, though, they get the nat 1 and their bonuses do not apply.
Critical fail.
The wisdom folks are fine with pair 9-18, and will the heart choosers get the enigmatic 15. Indigo kids, 6 for you. 6 for you. Okay. Thank you for allowing me to ritual on for this. Let's start with. Okay, I've incarnated on this planet, and it appears to me that I'm in a foxhole that most people are blissfully unaware that they're in. You've seen way more layers, especially in the social sphere of the realm that we encounter, and similarly see us in a warfare situation. Bring me up to speed in the world we live in.
Okay, well, let's layer it. What we'll first do is we'll just posit the spiritual layer as the more fundamental, but also the least legible. And we have the scene of Elijah saying, "Hey, let him see what I can see," and suddenly Elijah sees he's surrounded by an entire army, and then it goes away. So it is more fundamental and yet also less legible. So we have difficulty in navigating that way of perceiving the world.
I take it like as part of the incarnation, we get amnesia to where we were before.
Yes, and that seems to be the case.
And where we were before is this fundamental layer that surrounds and permeates. So
Or we get something like detuning, and so our ability to access the memory is both jammed by noise and also jammed by fake signal. So we sometimes are pulling things that seem like memories, but they're inserted. They're not really actual memories of where we were before. And sometimes it's just vague. Like we can't quite pull it. It's like too noisy. You can get like a very vague signal, like there's something there for sure, but I can't quite figure out what it is. And oftentimes for me, retroactively, like years later, I'll go, oh, now that's what it was. It's clearly exactly what it was, but it took accumulated time and or experience for more of it to land until I could identify what it was. But the signal was there for a long time, for example.
I'd posit that even in the ones we can't cognate, at some level we feel that it's signal, and that's why it stands out at the time.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, there's even certain, for me, a meta discipline of just being able to notice just that, like just the feeling of a friend of mine actually talked about in terms of hunting. You know, you're out in the woods and you're hunting and you're trying to move very quietly so you're not making disruption, and you notice that you've frozen and you're listening before you even notice what it was that caused you to freeze. Like something shifted. You can't even quite figure out what that was yet, but you've trained well enough to know, stop, listen, or whatever, observe. So then we'll move into the fifth generation stratum. And I think the reason for why that's useful is because part of the end state of the fifth generation of warfare is that it moves more and more in the spiritual direction. And so we'll notice that. So as we kind of come into, let's kind of jump into the Cold War. So we're jumping back in time.
Technically, what generation was that?
That was the end of the third and the beginning of the fourth. So you exited the advanced kinetic phase, like maneuver warfare at its most flush with airplanes, combined arms, and things like that, and radio enabling the coordination of diverse troops under the power of gasoline, being able to have a lot of velocity. So maneuver warfare reaches its peak in World War II, like really, really peak. And as we exit World War II, we enter into this constraint, which is ultimately the constraint of mutually assured destruction. And so the ability to deploy and escalate through kinetic, as we've recently seen in some of the conversations around Ukraine, has a cap put on it, which is, hey, we can only go so far with kinetic war. We can fight proxy wars and you do a little bit of maneuvering of chessboards down at the edge. But if we ever have to actually get into this maneuver warfare, kinetic warfare thing again, it ends in everybody dying. And so that ends up that puts a cap on it. And so then
year wise, the in the World War II is like 42 ish.
Well, World War II ends in 45.
45. Okay.
And then you actually have the Korean War, which is really a great example of this transition, because the Korean War was, in some sense, a very high intensity proxy war. Right? There was not an existential all out conflict between the West and the communists. Russia and China did not. Russia in particular did not go all in. Russia supported China. China supported North Korea. We supported South Korea. NATO came in. And so you had this, a bridge. It was right in between.
It's like, guys, we got a lot of weapons we still need to get rid of. Let's do it to these little countries.
They're right down here. And it didn't quite escalate, but it got close. And we actually saw, if you watch the history very closely, you see Eisenhower saying, hey, I might just nuke you guys. And so
year-wise, what was that?
They were in the early 50s, like 50 to 52.
Because I'm trying to pay close attention to like where television comes in and where the mass communication is at.
Nice.
During these things.
Yeah, so Korea is right at the beginning of the television era, and World War II is at the tail end of the radio era.
So and that's why so much of MASH worked.
Yeah, absolutely. So then you enter into the Cold War, which is characterized by proxy, meaning we still do kinetic warfare, but it's being done on a chessboard with smaller players, and nobody can quite escalate all the way in any particular location. And more things like propaganda, spycraft, extremely sophisticated and complex ways to try to undermine your adversary using a variety of techniques that are not strictly kinetic.
Can those be the good old days? For me, this that because when the actual physical conflict had to be simmered down, it became the race. And I think that we lost a lot when we won that race of the Cold War.
Yeah, so I agree. So the way that I framed this a couple of years back was in just the same way that the kinetic war moved from the invention of the rifle around the end of the American Revolutionary War, and there was an arms race of building more and more effective ways to deploy kinetic energy. It had been going on for a long time. It just is a measuring stick through to 1945. What I called the war on sense making at the time, which is ultimately evolved into fifth generation war, happens. We have propaganda invented as a concept in World War I, and it's very much a radio phenomenon, and continues. And of course, various forms of efforts to manipulate the hearts and minds of people have existed forever.
Yeah, but by then we figured out that you can convince ladies to start smoking if you call them liberty torches.
Yes, exactly, and the exact same people, right? We know this. We share the knowledge of who we're talking about specifically. And so if you do that line, let's just pick World War I and the rifle as a point in time, and just move the clock forward. The arms race in the war on sense making accelerated during that period of time, and somewhere in the 70s, we may have reached the World War II equivalent in the war on sense making. I always like the phrase I said, where we are all, was it John Jesus Angleton? What's his name? James? You know who I'm talking about, Angleton?
I don't.
Man,
I don't care where it came from, so I don't tie.
This guy's awesome. So he was the head of counterterrorism at the CIA at the inception of the CIA. So when the CIA
when the OSS switched to CIA,
when OSS becomes CIA, he's the guy who's in charge of not counterterrorism, counterintelligence. So he's the one who's trying to make sure that the Russian spies haven't subverted our spies. So he's got the double agents and the triple agents, and he's playing the double agent, triple agent game, and he goes nuts. Because in fact, the reality is that if you're he's at the tip of the spear of that problem. If you're constantly trying to figure out who's lying to who about what, and you're sitting next to a defected Soviet agent, but he may be a quadruple agent, and you're not quite clear what's going on.
That's a good metaphor for me for how I visualize spiritual warfare.
Keep going.
It's like all the chips on the board can flip either black or white, depending on what chips around it move. I see it like a game of Go or Othello. It's like what team that chip is on can flip. You can flip that chip to your side and such. And that's so. But go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Let's hold on to that for a second. I think that's right and important. But the reason why I use him as the metaphor is that he was because he happened to be in this very unique location, was one of the first people to cross the Rubicon into a world where the ability to know who is on your team is no longer possible, and up to and including being able to not even do that inside your own head with yourself. And so if we're in the Cold War, at the surface, the Cold War takes on the image of World War II, which is to say the bad guys looked like one thing and the good guys looked like another thing. We all wore uniforms. The uniforms were very clearly distinct. We all spoke different languages. Germans spoke German. Americans spoke American.
It very clearly went into team capitalism, team communism.
Exactly. And so we had that image. That's how it works. So if we look at our media, James Bond is English, and the English and the Americans are on the same team, and the Russians are over there, and they're on the other team, and we're done. But of course, the reality is that the essence of the kind of war that began to develop in the fourth generation, the Cold War era, is one where those distinctions are the fabric of where the front is being fought. Is MI6 really aligned with CIA? Is CIA really aligned with CIA? What does it even mean to be a member of CIA? Like that kind of stuff becomes more and more the point.
It's like, wait, it's now that we're global, it's a matter of the hearts and minds of the people more than who's on what land.
Exactly. And you've got basically maybe 3 or 4 moves. I mean, there's lots, but 3 or 4 that matter. One is Can you convert your enemy? So can you actively convert the hearts and minds of the people to align with your values, let's say, or your identity? 2 is, can you demoralize your adversary? Can you cause your adversary to begin to dissolve in his own interior, even better, to fight against himself? The 3rd is, can you strengthen yourself? Can you find ways to increase your own capacity to operate, usually against the previous 2? So can you become stronger technologically, economically, and therefore become more attractive? Remember, one of the big weapons that we used was blue jeans and rock and roll. And so
you want to be us. Yeah.
Can you make yourself more attractive?
What's the demarcation line between 4th and 5th officially?
Some people say there isn't one. It's not quite clear, but the movement from 4th to 5th is precisely, I would say, the movement between when there are clear teams that are deploying techniques against each other, and when the techniques have been released into the wild and are beginning the process of dissolving the entire category of the battlefield and the category of teams. So this is why 5th vectors towards spiritual. So as we move into from 4th to 5th, 4th, it will be characterized by things like propaganda. 5th will be characterized by targeted, personalized filter bubbles. You see the difference? If I'm broadcasting, it's like television to internet is a very nice way of making the distinction, actually.
It's almost like, culting, siloing.
Yep.
Herding.
And very, very hyper and hyperdimensional. As you move from 4th to 5th, you begin to realize that all possible kinds of relationship are potential locations. In fact, not just potential, but are actual locations of conflict. So economic warfare, financial warfare. And by the way, financial warfare becomes hyper. Do I want to impoverish you, or do I want to create class distinctions inside your world? Or do I want to orient you towards a race, towards a particular treasure that's going to distract you from something else? Like all bets are off. Like everything goes to hyperspace. And from my point of view, even more importantly, things like cognitive. We're actually going to be making epistemology begins to dissolve. Identity begins to dissolve. So, for example, the American Pentagon was completely incapable of being able to defend itself against the infiltration of woke into the interior of the Pentagon. Well, that's that's a 5th generation warfare vector, where you make it impossible for the body to cohere because now the body has multiple incompatible ideologies inside of it. Perfect. That's an injection of effectively a mind virus.
I think, for what it's worth, that woke used like the 3 stages of jihad. Let's see if we can weave in, as a shout out to the thumbnail, the 4th dimensional chess aspect. That's stuff to me like like for me, that's the fact that Trump's uncle got Tesla's papers, that sort of thing, and those time consequences. But really, the 4th dimension in this 4D chess that's referenced is time.
Okay, so that's great. So we'll play with causation and time, because one of the characteristics of 4D chess is the you bridge into 4D chess when you begin to play with things where obfuscation of causation is a minimum necessary requirement. So, for example, where exactly did COVID come from? Well, it's necessary, if you're participating in 5th generation warfare, that become simultaneously increasingly attractive and increasingly obscure, because you want to honeypot people into that, but you don't want any causal connections to be made. So it sort of dissolves. Causation begins to dissolve into this field where only the dupes continue to try to figure out what really happened, because they can't ever pull it apart. So they're now stuck in this fabric, this web of the undescribable.
Well, let's take that example, and we're like, okay, so, all right, if that's what's going on, Bob, I'm going to start this group over here arguing that it's this, and this group over here arguing that it's that. How are you going to cover up what it actually is?
Right. Well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to inject a lot of maybe 7 groups. I'm going to have those groups evolve over time. So as particulars become more and more concrete, they may teleport and actually pull people who are, let's say you're cohering around, it was actually a Chinese intentional act, right? So there's a group that's cohering
like they
around
unleashed
that.
it.
They unleashed it, right? So then what you do is you inject into that, actually, it was the Americans who unleashed it on the Chinese subversively as a counter narrative inside that narrative. But the key is not necessarily it's just to distract and confuse and to break apart the ability of groups to cohere, because they're looking for truth. And what you're going to do is you're going to find out, how do you hold truth in a place where in the current environment, their capacity to actually demonstrate and find truth and hold against it isn't adequate to the complexity of the operating environment. We don't have truth finding vehicles.
I got the media saying it's bad soup, so they don't know about either of the end or out.
Right.
You would
and if I'm looking at it from kind of like the battle map, I'm trying to see how are the networks cohering, who's gathering around what narrative, and what can I inject into those to either turn them against each other and have that be the noise, or dissolve them apart so I can see what causes these networks to hang together. And you can see, like, I'm basically doing something like network warfare at the highest level. And I'm looking at what causes, and think about that networks as an abstraction of relationships. And how do I continue to reduce or dissolve the efficacy of the networks that I want to reduce or dissolve? And then you're right at that point, you're in the space between the 4th and the 5th. When you start entering into the 5th, what was the other example I wanted to use? Yeah. So exactly the image of 4D chess. So what happens is you now say, hey, wait a minute. There are people, the possibility of 4D chess exists. We're beginning to see that you can push over there when you're really trying to go over here. In fact, oftentimes you have to push over here and over here so that you can have success over here. That's the nature of the.
It helps make the bridge of people to carry you from one to the other.
And you may have to actually terraform reality in certain ways, that you need to pretend like you're fighting on the mask front so that you're actually able to create this network coalescence here that gives you the territory to move to the next place you want to get to. And any sophisticated warfighter in 5th generation knows that, so they're all playing that. But now you get the image of, oh, well, then any move can colorably be identified as being a move in 4D chess, right? So you see it goes meta there. So now it's like, wait a minute, how can I even know what any move is? Is any move actually a move that is what it looks like, or is every move arguably, plausibly, actually, in spite of the intention of anybody, something that is a partial move in a larger construct where causation becomes increasingly impossible to map?
You don't know who you're working for, ever.
Ever. Right.
Always remember that. You'll be fine.
Now, I assume you're very familiar with stochastic terrorism.
Let's pretend I'm not, for the benefit of the people in the crowd.
Nice. So I'll give some secret information, which is I came across this notion most viscerally through a book by a guy named Bruce Sterling. And the book was either called Distortion or Distraction. I can't remember which one. Bruce is still alive, I think, one of the early cyberpunk authors. So in the same category as Gibson, in the same era, and equally prescient, actually more so. He was more prescient than Gibson in terms of how reality will actually play out. So he was telling a story set roughly now, in some sense, and in this information environment and this highly parasocial, what would you call it, heuristically glued together on the information field. I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. Well, I'll explain what I mean right now. Many, many, many people are trapped in a way of making sense of the world, of endeavoring to make sense of a world bigger than their personal experience on the basis of doing a lot of information research. So because you're on the internet, you can research a lot of stuff. You can track down the lineage of stuff. So you can say, hey, these Wikipedia articles were edited in a certain way. You're operating at the information field with lots of information. Then you're trying to use heuristics to glue that together to make sense of something. And the problem with that is that it has very little depth. And somebody who was actually physically there at the encounter, the event, the Wikipedia article says X, Y, and Z. Somebody who's actually there is like, yeah, not really. Like that's actually not how.
And also.
Yeah, exactly. Not really. And also. And of course, if you've been enough of those, you realize that's how it always works. And so this methodology of trying to make sense of the world using just third-party information isn't going to get you very far. So what was I saying?
And then you form a flotilla of of people also trying to and get a better sense
Yes.
of what's out there.
And
I realize I'm very excited to have realized that since we are in fifth generational warfare, this flotilla could theoretically be considered the guerrilla flotilla. And I am delighted to no end at that prospect.
Well, yes, actually. And so the notion of the flotilla, there are certain characteristics of what makes a more or less effective flotilla. The image that just came into my mind, and I'm not sure, caveat the aforementioned, the image of the network topology of the right and the left right now, where the right has like a shape like this and the left has a shape like this.
Yeah, that one.
If your network looks like this, you're a bad flotilla. The more your network looks like this, the better of a flotilla you are, because you obviously have a higher dimensional perspective on reality and therefore a larger checksum against which to filter the signals that are coming in that are intended to deceive. And so the likelihood of deception is lower if you have a functional flotilla that has qualitatively distinct dimensional perspectives.
I see it as channel churn. If we get the ones that fade out and new ones popping up, then that's healthy.
This is also true. This is also true. Yeah. Let me see. And by the way, this can be very fraught because you can do something which simulates this, but actually is this. This is diversity, equality, inclusion. The notion of diversity as a simulation of diversity is a common error, and so what happens is it looks like it's diverse, but in fact it's collapsing to a single point. So you're losing the robustness of the structure. You're losing the actual diversity in the system.
Unless that point is Christ.
Yeah, the triune God. So yes, yeah. Okay. The point would be the triune God. The triune God is that which is simultaneously unity and multiplicity in essence, without any possibility that the multiplicity collapsing to a false unity, because the unity in Christ or in the triune God is mystery. So it's infinite, so therefore explodes all categories, and that unity embodies itself in a continuous deployment of proliferating multiplicity. So that is the attracting point. That is the end. This is how you transition from fifth to spiritual. When you get into
going to collapse, like
that's the only place. That's the only actual safe place. The only strong foundation. Which is a funny thing to realize, but it is actually it. We can spend time on it. It's categorically true. Like it is logically and geometrically necessary as truth. And part of something I've been saying a lot for the past few years is that things that have been true for thousands of years have not been obligatory true, because you could get away with, at least for a period of time in life, to pretend that it's not true. But now, because, for example, as fifth generation warfare accelerates to pure noise, if you don't find that solid foundation, you'll just be caught in the bleed of everything that's going on beside you,
washed around from place to place.
Yeah.
One of my goals for this discussion is to help Grandpa understand what we mean by fifth generational warfare.
Grandpa, okay.
Because I think there's an influx of people into deeper internet spaces off of set in the slightly older than me generation.
Yeah.
And I'd like them to understand what we mean when we say fifth generational warfare.
Oof. Okay, so let me see if I can figure out how to say this right. So let me start.
Let me throw mine. It's
okay.
It's your enemy has infiltrated friends to convince them of ways to make you weak, like make sure your children don't have babies through a variety of means, such as transitioning or other non-regenerative relationships being encouraged. The information battlefield, we can't keep China and other nefarious forces like Lucifer off of the internet, and so that's the warfare you're engaged in by being here with us where everyone else is online.
Yeah, so let's try some other versions, see what sticks with Grandpa. So the enemy is able to take anything in you that is an actual virtue and turn it against you unless it is completely grounded in Christ. And this can be very, very practical. Empathy. So empathy is a virtue. The enemy can take empathy and make it extinguish your entire lineage. Oh, wow. The weaponization of everything is part of the idea. And the point is that the adversary, the enemy, does not care about what he is weaponizing. He's indifferent, utterly indifferent, and is ready to hop off of anything the second you try to shore it up. So now we're playing that kind of a whack-a-mole game. Okay, so we've sort of collectively rallied and pointed our attention to the weaponization of empathy. At the moment where that becomes shored up, he just jumps somewhere else, and it could be anywhere.
How about envy? Let's go to envy next. We've already got a month for pride.
Right, exactly. What does envy month look like? Or envy eon look like? Or courage eon? Oh my gosh, we just weaponized courage. That's fun. That'll happen soon, actually, I would imagine. And so what happens
might be the one after yesterday's event.
Exactly. That's why it came up for me. So, and to put it categorically, I mean, obviously, we're speaking to a grandfather that has a certain no, the life experience is the gap, not the cognitive capacity. If you think about it in terms of a hierarchy of values, the adversary works in basically two ways. One is he distorts your hierarchy, so he wants you to subordinate values that should be higher to values that are lower. And second is he endeavors to get you to go become an idolater and upregulate certain values well beyond where they ought to be, and ideally to put them at the top. And that's kind of his basic move, right? Distortion and idolatry. Distortion and idolatry.
Anything other than love at the top turns into a pathology.
Yeah.
And the mechanism that he's used to distort the values has been what I call set, the big black screen that has served as a ritual altar daily for most humans in America for decades now.
Yeah.
And the grandpas that and their lies to find weirdos on the internet sharing the truth as best we can. Welcome.
Yeah. So one of the antidotes for grandpa, as you point that out, is say, look, imagine if every single story that you've ever heard on television is a lie. Now subtract from yourself everything that you learned on TV. And the only thing you have to rely on are things that you experience first person for yourself at a deep enough level of connection that you weren't already filtering them through stuff that you had learned on TV. What do you got left? The answer is going to be very, very little. Very, very little. Unfortunately, that's the reality. And by the way, I'm talking about boomers, but for Gen X and Gen Y, Gen Z, it's
people
the same.
Just coming out of the school programming to realize
what do you got? What do you got that's real?
In the time I have left, that's actually where I want to take this, because I see, for me, one of my pitches is that we need initiation rituals to delineate, because there's a lot of people like myself who hyper adolescent video gamed into their 40s who ought to be initiated into reality. And I work on ways to help with that. But similarly, I think we need an initiation ritual into manhood for like, okay, you're past Disney now. Here's what the world is really like. And here's what we know. And I saw your talk with Gray and Annie and think that beyond initiation, perhaps a parallel education for everybody coming into where we're actually sitting.
Yeah, I tend to actually collapse those two. So for me, and interestingly enough, the last conversation I was having, we spoke specifically about initiation. To me, initiation is maybe the most critical thing right now, and I see at least 3 different kinds of things that have to happen in that boundary, in that membrane. One is exclusion. And so initiation keeps out that which should not be in, and we need a lot of that. The second is transformation. So by virtue of initiation, you have to be transformed into one who can properly participate in what's in. And then the third is orientation orienting, which is to say which in, like who are you supposed to be with? It's not random, and it's not obvious, right? So are you supposed to be in Arizona with these people, or are you actually supposed to be in Alaska with these people? It's that needs to happen. We need to have that actual sort, because there's a reality to it. Again, it's not random and it's not arbitrary. It's not necessarily, it may be exactly specific. It may be some openness to it, but it's definitely not completely random and arbitrary. Now, when I look at that category, the category 2 and 3, what I notice is that there's a certain kind of recursion or a build. So as you become more capable of participating on the inside and you become more properly placed with the right people in the right place, you then have more particular or more bespoke elements of competency. So education becomes, in the beginning, education and initiation are identical, because everything's true for everybody. You got to move into something like adulthood, which means moving through adolescence, which means moving through. And then when you enter into the late stages of adolescence, you're actually beginning to have a proper role to play. So then you have to be fitted with the right capacities to play that role. So if you can't yet tell the truth, you're not yet ready to play any role. If you can tell the truth, then you have to be fitted with the ability to tell the truth about what specifically, like what is your role in this larger flotilla, for example. Yes, I would have liked to have seen this being done with real rigor at least 10 or 15 years ago, and was trying to figure out how to promote that idea. We're very, very late to the game, but perhaps that's just how it works. But I agree completely. If what I'm saying maps largely to what you've been talking about, that is, what's up.
What do you like in forms of what's developing as far as, say, co-op homeschool curricula or other manifestations of the parallel education for?
Okay, so there's a pile. We didn't get there with Great Ivy. So I'm a big fan of forest school. So I'm a big fan of kids, particularly younger kids, being outside in nature, relatively unsupervised, and getting hurt. Not killed, but hurt. And having a lot of spontaneous interactions with learning how to work together. Like, how are we going to get across the stream? And you see it, by the way. Like, if I go to a place that has the right conditions, you've got kids there and you just leave them there for 30 minutes, you'll just see like a group of 4 boys for some reason suddenly lifting rocks and trying to build a bridge across the creek. And you don't have to do anything. You just watch them do it. Okay, so forest school, more of that, because creation is a great teacher. One of the best parts about nature as a teacher is you can't manipulate nature using human manipulation techniques. And so it gives you a boundary of where human manipulation techniques can't possibly be used, which then makes that part of you. You become someone who also can't be manipulated by human manipulation techniques in a profound way. I diagnose this as one of the primary failures of urban civilization, is that humans become the only thing humans ever encounter is other humans. And so you assume that human manipulation technique is the only thing that actually matters. And in some sense you must, because if you don't, the ones around you who get better at it will eat your lunch. Maybe quite literally. Yeah, quite literally. Okay, second, and this is maybe the centerpiece, is the reintegration, or the disintegration of the siloed discipline. So school, church, community/family is disintegrated, and then those relational fields are reintegrated. So this is like homeschool co-op, where people who are in church and people who are in community are also co-parenting each other's children in a purposeful way. And this can look really, really well like vocational orientation. So you notice that person over there is teaching art, and this person over here is teaching history. And there's a feeling of what it feels like when somebody's in their proper vocation. Like, that's the meta level. Because what you want children to understand is, what does it feel like in me when I am leaning into the thing that I'm actually called to do, so that I can step into that more and more fully. And what's the beauty of what happens when a person who is a proper apprentice meets a proper master, and there's a connection along that vocational relationship that is found, like the love for woodworking that a master conveyed to a child who's supposed to become a woodworker. That love transmission is very powerful and needs to be learned.
I got a guy, Sartori, was pushing explicitly like trade guilds showing up at churches and recruiting there.
I support this fully. However, the thing I would say is that those trade guilds have to reopen themselves to holistic. In other words, I can't have somebody become a master woodworker who is not also a parent. You can't do that. If your trade guilds, again, this reintegration, you have to think about the whole person and make sure that you are not separating somebody into vertical, separated pieces, because that's where those gaps are where the adversary does his best work. And then the third, and you can even do this is like the classical trivium. So you still have the role of the formal trivium that says, look, grammar is a thing, and everybody needs to learn how to speak properly. You need to understand how to notice when a word means something, and how the logos expresses himself through you into the world. So learning this, it's very difficult for the modern mind to even grasp what I'm trying to say here. But it's something like, there's something that makes good poetry good poetry. Again, the modern mind's gonna have a really hard time with that because it produces complete vomit and pretends like that's good poetry. But there's something that's
It rhymes. It rhymes.
Or it anti-rhymes, and therefore it's even better. No, there's something that makes good poetry good poetry. There's something that makes good art, and that something is grammar at the bottom, like the actual ability to understand the nature of how God has constructed language so that it can express Him into the world. And so there's something in the trivium as well. So I think all three of those, you've got something like forest school, something like direct encounter with nature and adventure and hazard, and particularly something that is happening that is definitely not going to be manipulated by human manipulation techniques. Then there's something about the fully integrated whole humanness and noticing how God has appointed us so that we have roles that are proper for us to play, and being in your body, being able to feel what happens when you're in the right relationship, when relationships hit their harmonic frequency and something begins to happen there that is not the same as neutral or not the same as off. And we've all had this at least once, hopefully, in our lives.
And we're getting this through an education where what education manifestation accomplishes thus.
Oh, I'm not familiar with any that does it particularly well. I thought we were talking about what's it from a design point of view.
No, it's what I'm looking for is like people like, all right, I acknowledge that there's better for my children than the public. The public is not. I want to be a private citizen, not a member of the public.
Yeah.
And how do I find these co-op? Are there such things as homeschool co-ops? How do I find them?
There are such things as homeschool co-ops. They're relatively common in places where the density of homeschool is relatively high, which tends to be places where the density of people who go to church is relatively high. So if you're in New York City, you may have a hard time finding a homeschool co-op. You may have a hard time. I certainly noticed as I traveled around the country, certain places were homeschool deserts. And by the way, there were two flavors of that. One, homeschool desert, was one where there just wasn't any homeschooling at all. The second is where there was homeschooling, but they were extremely isolated. They were just absolutely not going to be doing anything. The co-op wasn't going to happen. But for example, all the way up in British Columbia, there was a community there that had lots of homeschoolers, and they had lots of co-ops. Here in Western North Carolina, lots of homeschools, lots of co-ops. And so there's social conditions that seem to give rise to that. And I don't know how you transition an environment towards that if you're on your own. I'm sure there are ways to do it, but I'm not quite sure exactly how because I've never practiced that.
I'm also I just want to speak them into existence in people's minds, because I think that's a big need. And similarly, the ideal situation is you have the single mom kid. Yeah. Realizing he's getting a bullshit education from school, can find one of these homeschool curriculums that deliver on the actual things.
Well, so if we want to speak him into existence, there's basically two things to say. One is there is an absolute wealth of homeschool curriculum that can take you the burden of, hey, I need to invent a curriculum, and just take that away. Like that can be done. And there's many, and frankly, they're good. So you'll 10x from public school just by making that shift. Two, literally, you getting together with one other family is a multiplier effect. if you feel the burden, as I do, of doing homeschool on your own, just you and your family, for lots of reasons, that can be very, very heavy. But if you say, hey, what happens if one day a week we get together with one other family and we do something together? There's a synergy to that that opens up. It reduces it makes things easier. It makes things more creative. It makes things healthier. It makes things more alive. And it opens your mind to like, well, what would happen if we did this with two families?
Have some participatory knowledge of what neighbors used to mean.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't, you don't have to jump all the way to the end of imagining a school of 150 kids. You can say, what happens if I just do this one family one day a week, and then begin to build from there. And back to vocation, by the way. Some people are properly appointed to administer that kind of a thing. Right? They're the ones who can throw a big birthday party and it doesn't put any sweat on their brow. Some people can't. Their job is to actually be the ones who teach dance. Fine. Everybody's got to do their proper thing. So the more you can notice, like at your church, who is supposed to be doing what, and invite people into taking of their proper responsibility more deeply and apportioning things correctly, the easier it gets for everybody. And what you'll notice is that there's like a double loop. One loop is triple loop. One loop is enter into communion. Actually find a real church where you're actually entering into communion. Second loop is from that place of communion, notice what it's like to be in community. And then the third is from the place, and this is a triangle. It's not in series. You'll notice that in communion, in community, there's a way to support this process of education, because you have a community of people. And there's an old guy over there who's kind of lonely, but actually was a master auto mechanic. And there's 3 teenage boys who really need to figure out how to do a project and refurbishing a truck. Guess what? That is a perfect opportunity, and that will be nourishing in hyper exponential ways. And you noticed it.
And by the grace of God, you were there to notice.
Yep.
Right.
And the funny thing is, and that's all you necessarily had to do. Just notice it, make it slightly more legible, and then allow it to happen. You don't have to do a whole lot more. That's a mindful thing. Many people can be burdened by feeling like they need to take on more or to formalize and institutionalize, because that's kind of like the muscles we've built, that if it hasn't been formalized and institutionalized, it's not real. Particularly, I find women will have that because it's part of the subversion of the feminine. But it doesn't have to be. Like just introducing, I mean, the word just is so funny, just introducing the right people with the right orientation. Like, oh, this is why we're talking, is how you weave these networks together so they begin to fabricate something that's alive. And then as things have aliveness in them, they will tend to grow of their own accord. Other problems will happen then, but that's the first step.
I don't want to take much more of your time. I'll take another 10 minutes if you give it. And with that, I'd like to steer toward, so we initiate you into manhood. Does that include a Mike Ben's view of at what point do we educate them about the layer cake of things that aren't included in the public education that a man should probably know about the way the world works?
Well, that's a really good question. My first instinct would be to say that there are things that a intelligence operative needs to know that a shepherd doesn't need to know, and vice versa. There are things a shepherd needs to know that an intelligence operator doesn't need to know, and that's okay as long as you're integrated into a proper community. Now, the problem is that we don't live like that. Our shepherds are online, and since our shepherds are online, they're being subject to maximum scale 5th generation warfare, and so they basically have 2 choices. They can either unplug from that environment, which might be exactly the right choice, or they have to build a liturgical capacity, a capacity to be in relationship with this adversary that renders it no longer able to destroy them by mind, body, and soul. That's challenging because there are many people who just are not going to get there. That's just not the nature of who they are. My response to something like, how do I teach grandma to be safe from AI bots is not to turn her into a cyber warrior. That's not how it's going to be. The answer is put your phone on mute. Just don't. If it doesn't have my name, right? If my name didn't come up, then just hit end. Or even better, just throw away your cell phone and get an old analog phone. Worst case scenario.
Oh, no.
It's even worse.
That's a trap because
Okay.
like all those numbers still get pumped.
Still get hit. Still get hit. Yeah, nice.
Like those are the most vulnerable.
Oh, because they don't even have, you can't even build an AI defense on your end. Yeah. There's a few techniques like, I do with my family, my daughters, my wife, saying, hey, we're going to be building a practice that every time I talk to you on the phone, I'm gonna ask you a question about a moment that was unique between the two of us that only you and I would remember. And it's a really touching, fun thing to do. Oh, by the way, if I don't remember that properly, hang up the phone. Why? Because I'm probably a bot. That's probably not really me. What do you mean? Don't worry about it. Right? So you can.
If I call from jail, it's
right.
most likely a bot.
If for some reason I'm in Africa, and I've had that experience. So what was I saying? So there's my initial instinct is something like so initiation and boundaries. There are people who are properly called to actually create boundaries and to be in the marches, right? To be on the wall. If you're a person who's called to be on the wall, then you should be on the wall. You know what? Actually, I can make this even simpler. Let me fast forward. Let's jump forward like a generation or two. So we're like, call it 80 years in the future. In the future, access to the internet will be very limited, and it will involve, it'll be liturgical. All of it, all access to the digital will be liturgical. So if you want to get on the internet, you will have to climb a local mountain, and you will have to go into the monastery. You will have to fast for a day. You have to undergo certain ablutions, and then you will get onto the internet. It'll be a kind of a monastic sensibility. And therefore, of course, most people won't. People may have private local nets that are highly encrypted, that they're operating in the local environment, like walkie-talkies or something like that sensibility. Like only people on the local net can communicate. But everybody will have their private, Great Wall of China. The open internet, the thing that communicates between, will have significant boundaries, including an entire group of people who and liturgies that are necessary to participate. That's the actual end state. That's the only way that it works at the end of this thing.
That's a beautiful dystopia.
Well, and your local environment is quite beautiful, quite naturally beautiful, quite connected. Like the land where you live with really high intimacy. Like you know the flowers, the trees, the animals, the water, and all the people, and how to be in very close relationship with it very, very well.
But you don't know that there's people being bombed in Somalia anymore?
Probably not. If you do, it's because you're supposed to. Right? There's no point in my 6-year-old daughter has no need to know that right now. Because there's nothing she can do about it. So if your agency, if information systematically...
Are you suggesting we build digital gardens? What?
No, I'm suggesting we build natural gardens, and then we connect those natural gardens digitally through boundaries that have the appropriate discernment to make sure that what's flowing through them is not hazardous to the interior.
All right, but the people in the garden can still order Uber Eats, right?
Probably not, actually. No, probably not. Sorry.
Oh no, your dystopian nightmare is crushing.
No, probably not Uber Eats. I hate to say it. You probably can get a feast day. There will probably be profound feast days where multiple different groups will come together, many of which may actually pilgrimage from one place to another.
God bless feast days.
God bless feast days. Yeah, much better than Uber Eats.
Let's spin it. Okay, so all right, I'll be one of the fellas on the wall. How do I find the others?
You're on the wall. Okay, so
I decided I'll take the black. Whatever, man. Let's go. Yeah, where do I sign up? What do I do now? Where do I learn what I need to know?
So there's this. This is probably going to end up being a meta guild. So think of it almost like a knighthood. So you've now become a knight of St. John. And
we like St. Christopher the dog-headed, I think.
Nice. Okay, that's a good one. Knight of St. Christopher the dog-headed. So you enter into that guild, and that guild is orthogonal, meaning you as a Knight of St. Christopher are simultaneously vertically integrated into your garden, into your kingdom, and horizontally integrated into other knights of this sacred knighthood. And you are mutually supportive. Meaning, if necessary, you will come to the banner a call of other knights to protect their particular kingdom, even if it's not your kingdom under attack, and vice versa. And you're also mutually training. Right? So there's a process of forcing and pushing each other to be quite capable of holding the responsibility that you're holding, vertically and horizontally.
And I find the others at these full moon estuary potluck dinner campouts.
You'll go on pilgrimages. You'll walk across the land. You will go into locations that will have high discernment and high ambiguity. You'll tune into this conversation, and you'll be like, "Who the fuck are these guys?"
And why are they saying what I need to hear?
That seems very unsettling and dangerous. What do I do next? Okay, and then you start to follow that, and that's part of the initiation, by the way. Part of the initiation is mystery and the occult, in the sense of not the occult in the simple sense, the occult in the sense of like obscure because it needs to be obscure so that the truth is perceived only by those for whom that truth is proper. The bat signal is a vernacular way of saying it. And then you'll get pulled in and you'll be initiated. And as you're initiated, there will be a process of being able to identify where you should be. Maybe you should be in the Knights of St. John, not the Knights of St. Christopher.
They're a good group. They're a good group.
Yeah, we like them, but they're a little bit,
You got to be willing to eat the locust for that one, though. So it's a deal breaker sometimes.
Right, because people have proper place. And it's funny because I'm sure you've heard this McLuhan quote of the maybe you haven't because I may have hallucinated it. Digital retrieves the medieval. But
I'm intrigued.
It's definitely worth pulling on that thread. That's part of what's coming up here is that a lot of what we're going to see in the era of the digital, as we're moving into that, is going to look quite significantly like the medieval. So you will have guild structures, you will have knights of holy orders, you will have kingdoms that have profound vertical depth and vertical going all the way up to Christ and down all the way into the soil. Because these are proper, the image of those orders map to the kinds of things that happen in a digital environment, a truly digital environment.
Mooks and knights. Yeah. All right. You got anything you want to plug on the way out?
I think that more people should use the saving throw ritual. That's what I have to plug.
I agree. It's a mimetic minefield out there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time, sir, and the view count boost I get from it.
Yes. All right. Well, I see you in Lake Junaluska. That's a pretty long way for you to go.
I'm gonna make it.
Oh, all right.
I'm supposed to party with Here's afterwards. It's exciting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice. Exciting times. Cheers.
Cheers. End record.